Hello, grade 9. Today we are going to be talking about your magazine layout. And specifically, we are going to talk about different parts of the magazine as well as principles of design. Before we get started, I wanted to go through a little overview with you so you could wrap your head around how will the design part of this unit go. You've already written your articles, you've done your photo lesson with Mr. Ignacy, and now you're going to be starting to put it all together into a design that hopefully showcases your best work. So over the break, we've asked you to download the program InDesign. Today, we are going to learn about different parts of a magazine, specifically an article, as well as we're going to review the principles of design. Today, you're going to be able to browse some templates. So, similar to if you used Canva in the past, you've seen that they have templates for you. You have some InDesign templates that you can use, and then hopefully, you'll be able to plan your design today. I'm going to show you resources today as well on our website that have a lot of tutorials, and they are going to teach you how to actually learn how to use InDesign. So everything from downloading the templates to how you add text boxes and adjust pictures, you're going to have to do a tutorial on basically learning the basics of InDesign. Then you're going to get started after you've learned how to use the program to create your design. So it's really important here that we practice learning how to use the software before you actually start creating your specific design. That way you'll have a chance to make mistakes and kind of play around with the software. So you'll be doing that for 2 class periods. You'll have work time to create your design. And then on the third class period, you're actually going to bring a printed off design. So you'll print off on a big piece of paper. And we're going to do something called a gallery walk in order to get feedback. Then you're going to take that feedback, make adjustments, and then turn in your final work, all for homework, the adjustments and turning it in. When we turn in our final work for a printer, we call it packaging. It's important that we package our work instead of just sending them a file so that we can have high quality images to make sure they have the same fonts that you've used. And so you're going to be packaging that for the actual editors in our class. And remember, before we went on break, we asked for volunteers to be our design team. So the design team is actually going to take your package and turn it into one magazine and send that to the printer. So that is what the whole outline of the rest of the unit will look. So it's basically learning about making a magazine, learning how to use the software InDesign that you've not used before, and then creating your design and getting feedback to finish it up. So to help you organize this, in Google Classroom, I've posted this designing your article checklist. And so everything that we've talked about and will talk about today is on the specific checklist. I've also linked in all the videos that you'll need to help walk you through that. And then at the end, I've reviewed things that you'll want to make sure that you have in your work and the principles of design that we want to double check. So this will be a great resource for you to have in Google Classroom that you'll want to use as you're working through the next couple of weeks, along with the actual website. So there's a website called Publishing Your Article. It's about InDesign. And on there are all the tutorials that you've already probably seen, this how to download InDesign, as well as the first introduction tutorials, and everything that you'll have to do for this project is on that website, as well as this Google Doc. So you will have all the resources at your fingertips to be successful with this unit. All right. So let's get started with the parts of a magazine. So you know that we still print magazines, newspapers to read in person, and we also print for digital purposes. So that could be magazines that are still produced to read on a Kindle or an iPad, as well as magazine articles that are produced and published on a website. We're going to be focusing on printing a hard copy of a magazine altogether. So we're going to be having one magazine with all of our articles in it, but we're also going to be publishing this on the web so that you can send this to other family members around the world and also just always have access to it. So you can see here, that there are examples from past classes. And today I'll be showing you some of those as well. So these are all links that you can reference later to past classes. All right, for this part, I want to make sure that you have your notebook and you are ready to take notes. Things that I want you to notice are key vocabulary. So if I circle a word or say this is a key vocabulary word, I want you to write it down along with what it means to you, um, as well as any tips that I mention while you're designing your article. So maybe we'll pause the video and make sure that you have all those learning materials ready for you. All right. So the first vocabulary word that we're going to review is the word page and spread. Let's start with page. Page simply means one page. An article can be one page. If you have a shorter article or you're only including a little bit of your excerpt there, you may only design one page. If you're going to make your design go across 2 pages in a magazine like this one, when we combine 2 pages together, that is called a spread. And so you'll be hearing that vocabulary used in the tutorials as well as in the actual software of InDesign as well. So if you're only having one page, it's a one page. If you're having 2 that are next to each other in a magazine that opens, that's called a spread. So those will be the first 2 vocabulary words that you write down for yourself today. The next part is the title or the headline. So you can choose just to write down title, or if you want to write down both title and headline, that's fine. The title and the headline is the first thing that a reader will notice when flipping through a magazine. So since it's the first thing, you really want that to stand out and to be interesting. Um, Things you can do to make that happen is making sure that you put the font in a size that's bigger than the other text elements. So if we look at this example, you can see there are 3 main text elements. There's a pull quote here, there's some body text here, and then the biggest is the title. That is here. So you want to make sure that when we open up the magazine, it is larger than the other text. You'll also make sure that it is read first. So ways that we can make sure something is read first is either putting it on the top of the page, because we usually read from top to bottom, or we also read from left to right. So something that is on the left-hand side of the page. I would say knowing that rule of wanting it to be big towards the top or the left-hand side is that if I had my title over here in the corner, that would be the worst position for my title. Okay, so thinking about and applying that rule. It should be interesting and meaningful. So that's referring to the text, actually. So in the templates, you'll see that it just says title or interesting title here. You'll want to really think about how can you create a title that captures the audience's attention and really kind of summarizes what your article is about. All right, so that is our next vocabulary word, title. When we're thinking about font size for this, for sure this is going to be well over 20-point font. Maybe it would be 40-point font. This is probably 70. So thinking about what you can fit on your page. You will also notice something I like that people do in the title is when it's longer, they make some of the words stand out. So they've used some bold text here. Who you are, have passed. They wanted those words to stick out to us, so they even bolded those words for us. And they did that same thing here. And here they even used a Photoshop effect to make it look like this photo is bleeding into the title. So thinking back at your middle school tech classes, you probably had some Photoshop skills that you could bring in to this work as well. So that's kind of the goal, is to grab all the knowledge you've learned in previous grades and use that as well. All right, so now we've done page and spread. We've talked about title or headline. Let's talk about byline or credit. So when we think about the byline or the credit, we are talking about the author or the artist. That's the photographer. So this should look different than the body text. So the body text is the rest of this, and we'll be talking about that soon. But if you've noticed here, that this, let me just make this smaller, person's name is the author, and the text is different than that of the body text. So making here, they've used all capital letters. They've also used a different font. So this font that doesn't have any tails is called a sans serif font. And then if I added tails to it, like Times New Roman, that would be a serif font. So they even changed the type of font that they use to make it really stick out so that we didn't think that this Kate was part of the article. So it's different than the body text. It can be bolded to make it different, italicized, or even caps locked. It can be set in the same size as the body text or a few points smaller or even larger. Okay, so if the body text, and it's very often that the body of this article, the text might be 10 point, which seems small. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that means that the byline, the author, could be either 9 point or 11 point, depending on what you want to do. If you want to make it stick out or to hide a little bit more. The placement can be changed depending on the article. So here we've already talked about that byline. And another one is over here. So here you can see that to me, that text size even looks the same size as the body text, but they've used capital letters to make that stand out so that we know that's not actually part of the article. You will keep this in mind, the byline or credit, for both your author's name, so you, as well as the captions for your photos. So we'll want to make sure that we give photo credit to yourself because you're the artist as well. But we'll be citing that properly here. You can see that one maybe was cited here for that photo as well. All right, so now you have byline or credits written down. The next one is the body text. So this is the most important part of the article because it's actually the article itself. So it is the article. It is going to be super important that that is the first thing that you add to make sure there's enough space for your article to be laid across either a page or the spread. It's the largest art or part of any good page or spread. So make sure that the content is good. It takes up the largest amount of space usually on an article. All right, so that is your body text. It, again, like I mentioned, is the first thing that you should add so that you can make sure that it's laid out perfectly. You'll want to make sure that it's easy to read. One thing that we can do to make it easy to read is by making it spacious. All right, we can make things spacious by using columns, and we can make it spacious by having more lead between the lines. Okay, so this leading line is kind of like the spacing. So if you're thinking of a Google Doc, you might use 1.5 spacing. If you're looking to add more leading in here, that would be here in between these lines. So here, the designer made sure that they had columns, and you can see that there's plenty of space between the columns. This is called the gutter. So the gutter here has plenty of space. The gutter here has even more space because it is in the crack of that magazine. All right. And they definitely spaced out their line. Their line spacing was more than just 1 point. So that's ways to make it readable. Another one here, this is very easy to read because it has good contrast. Here, everything is lined up, which we'll talk about when we talk about principles of design. And we have a black background with white font, which also makes that body text easy to read. All the body text, so here's body text, is using the same font. So it's not switching between types. It's not switching between a serif and a sans serif or even different types of serif. And it's also using the same size. You can see here there's titles that have a different size, but the body text will have the same font and the same size. Here, this body text used what's called a drop cap. So you might see that as a common element to kind of give a little design, a little spice to an article. So you can look for a drop cap, and where that is just making the first letter of the first word this is taking up the space of 2 lines here. So you can make it take up the space of 5 lines. You can make it take up the space of however many lines you want. So you could also use a drop cap. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about in this one, and none of this use that, but there is something called right justification that I think looks nice. And we are actually using it in all of our templates. And that's where not only does the left side line up, which it does here, except for the tabs when it's a new paragraph, but also this right side lines up. So you're going to see in the templates that we can actually choose to make the spacing perfect so that it lines up on the right-hand side as well as the left-hand side. That's commonly used when there are columns. All right, the next element that we want to talk about is your pull quote. So a pull quote can be used as a hook to make part of your story really stand out. So you want to think of the interesting part. So one example I use always every year is there was an article that was quite funny, and one of the parts said, "And there I was, standing with my pants around my ankles." So that's a part that would grab a reader's attention, thinking, what is this story about? So you want to think of a part of your article that is highly emotional. So it could be a really sad part, a really exciting part, a really surprising part. And you want to pull that out of the article and leave that as an artistic element on the page or on the spread, so that the reader would look at the title, and then the next thing they would look at would be the pull quote to see if they're interested in reading that article. So here we have several examples. It's good to know that you don't have to write this again. You don't have to invent it. It's taken directly from the body text. So it's something that's already in your article. So think of one sentence or 2 sentences that is already in your article. The design should be large enough to see and pull the reader's attention to. So here you can see, this is a great example. The biggest font is the title. The second biggest font is the pull quote. And then the third biggest, of course, is the body text. Here there's a pull quote, and they really designed this by putting this in one text box and making it large. And then they added these artistic elements on the side, the quotation marks, to really tell the reader, hey, this is a quote from my article. And here they did a similar thing, as well as putting a background color here to make that pull quote really stand out. Here they use that same element of drawing on the quotation marks here. So yeah, let's make sure that it's not as large as the title. It can be framed. So here, this one is framed with a square. The other one is just here to the left-hand side. And in some of the templates, you'll see that you can even put a pull quote. Let's say that we have these columns together. I could place a pull quote here and use text wrapping to kind of push away the body text so that it doesn't overlap. So those are some things you can consider for your pull quote. So you want to choose something that's a hook, the interesting part, and then design it as the second biggest element of text element, because your photos will probably be bigger as well. All right, what's up next here are your image captions. So the design is going to be very similar for your image captions as that author or the byline. So you want to make sure that it's designed very close to the image so that we know. So here you can see this is a caption. It's giving photo credit. Here's another one giving a caption of the photo credit. You can place it on the bottom part, and you want to have it be either the same size or 1 or 2 points smaller than the body text. So for example, if this body text is 10-point font, then this image caption is probably going to be 8-point. What do you need in the image caption? So for every one of your photos, and these are 2 perfect examples, you will give a name in quotations to the photo. So if you took the photo, you are the artist, you get to invent the title of it, and then by the photographer. So this one is right on the bottom of the photo. Here's one that's on the top. So here I laid the text on top of the photo and I gave the title, Painting of Giraffe, and then by the artist. So you want to make sure that you give credit and practice giving credit, even if it's to yourself. Here you can tell that I've added like a little box here, and I've changed what's called the opacity of that box. So the box was originally black, but you can notice that I'm kind of seeing some of the green show up behind it. That's because I've made that black and then I've changed the opacity from a slider to from 0 to 100. 100 would be full black and 0 would be completely transparent. You wouldn't tell it had color. And I just changed the slider maybe to be around like 30%. And I had that effect. The reason I did that was to really make the words stand out on the page. So here that white painting of giraffe really pops out. So you want to make sure that you can also read your image captions. All right. So for us, we are citing the image with a title and the photographer. That is the most important part, and making sure that we are able to read it. So either right below your picture or on top of it, using a little rectangle to be between the back layer, which is the photo, and the top layer, which is the text. So you're sliding just a little box in between there and then changing the opacity, which also means transparency. All right. And then we have 2 extra parts for our assignment. We are going to add an author's blurb and the artist statement. So the author's blurb is an introduction to the author, so it's about you. It should be slightly different than the body text. What's tricky with these 2 elements for both of them is that when they are the same font size, and same font type, it can look like it's just part of the article. And then we don't know that we're actually reading one of the author's statements or the artist's statement. So you want to make it slightly different. In this example, they put a blue background in and they also italicized it to make it look different than the rest. All right. So it should be slightly different. Italicizing helps it. It could be slightly smaller as well. So maybe 1 point font smaller. So if your body text is 11-point font, maybe these might be 10. Or if it's 10, maybe it's going to be 9. All right. Then the artist statement is going to explain the art. So your photographs on the spread. The same thing. It's going to be slightly different, italicized, slightly smaller, different from the author's blurb as well. So now we have 3 texts that are going to be similar: the body text, the artist statement, and then the author's blurb. So you have to get creative on how you make sure that the reader knows, hey, I'm reading something different now. All right. So this is one about the writer here. It says Lauren Freer teaches humanities, and she talks about herself, and it's in italics and it's in black. And then the artist statement is in white. It has the blue in the background to make sure that we can really see it. And so that really stands out and looks quite different. So that is the author's blurb and the artist statement. Here's another example I just wanted to share with you. And we're going to actually look at all of the elements here on this together. So we've talked about the title. So that's here. And you can tell that the title stands out. It's up on the top, and it's actually to the left as well. It's not the most left element, but I think it still looks good here. So we have the title. Then we have this byline, who wrote it. And then her body text starts here, and then it reads down. Right here it reads down, and then it goes over here. So I can tell all of this is the same. Oops, this part as well. She added the pull quote here. Also a different, stands out a little bit. And then she has the author's note and the artist statement there, along with her 3 photographs and the caption. So she's titled it and given it a said who the artist was. So, all right, we're moving on to the second part of this lesson, which is around design. So I have a quote on here that says, "Good design is like a refrigerator. When it works, no one notices. But when it doesn't, it sure does stink." And so what I'm trying to explain here is that there's not often times that we notice in a magazine, oh, this is a great design. Unless you are a design junkie like myself, you don't really notice that this layout is so creative or the way they place the title here is so good. But when it's not quite right, so just like if your refrigerator stops working and all the food rots and it stinks to high heaven, that doesn't work. So if something is wrong with our layout, that's when we notice like, oh, that seems crooked, or that doesn't really match, or I can't really see what that says because the body text is too small or it is on a very dark background. So what we're going to talk about now is how to make sure that your design is a good design. And so nobody is noticing and distracted by any elements that seem a little bit off, like a stinky fridge. So the way I like to remember this is by remembering that I don't want my stuff to look like crap. So CRAP stands for 4 different things that we're going to talk about today. And hopefully this is a review for most of you. So the C is standing for contrast. That is a great rule to remember. Contrast simply means that elements that are not the same should be looking very different from each other so that they stand out. Making them slightly different can confuse your audience and they don't really see the difference. So if we're thinking about contrast, we can think of things like color. So here, top or bottom, which one looks better to you? I'm hoping you're saying the bottom one because the top one is really hard on our eyes. And the reason it's hard on our eyes is because red is a very bright color and blue is a very bright color. This is the most common mistake that people make when they are doing design right away, and it's to have a bright or dark background and then a bright or dark foreground. So when they're not opposites, it can be really hard on our eyes or hard to read. So this bottom one works because the background is a light color, and then the foreground, which is the text on top of it, is a darker color. So you can have contrast in color. You can also have contrast in size and font. So in this example, the title is much larger than the body text. So I've chosen, let's say that this is a 70-point font versus a 10-point font, making sure that your title is much larger or anything else that you want to stand out is much larger helps bring that to the audience's attention. Okay. You can also have contrast in the fonts that you use. So before we talked about having a title possibly that had these tails on it. And so that's called a serif font. And then if you're having another element, you might make sure that it doesn't have tails, which is called the sans serif font. Okay, so you can have contrast in many different elements, color, size, and different fonts as well. Contrast draws attention and helps readability. So here, all this seems in line and it seems like it goes together. It's all the same, except then this one is popping out and it's drawing our attention. So basically our focal point goes here. So contrast helps draw attention and readability. Here on the bottom, I did that trick again where I put a black box behind my words to make it have more contrast. If I'm using this white text, it would have been difficult to see on this light photograph. So I made sure to put something behind it. And then again, I changed that opacity to make the transparency less so that it wasn't black completely and we could still see some of the photo behind it. I did that a couple times because I think that's an important element for you to tie into your work. Here's 2 examples. Here, I would say the contrast in this body text, this artist statement, black on pink is not good. They're both dark colors. However, white on pink has a dark background and then a light foreground, the text. All right, so that's just an example to help you see contrast. So, C stands for contrast. The R stands for repetition. Repetition means repeating visual elements on the design throughout the piece. This can help tie it together, especially if you're doing a spread. So remember, if you're doing a spread, it's going to go across 2 pages. We want those 2 pages to have elements that are similar so that we know it all flows together. Places that you can repeat is in color. So if you're going to have an accent color like this article does, it has red here, red here, red here, red, red, red. It's not switching. You can have it in shape. So here they've used rectangles for all of their photos. They're not adding in a circle there. Texture, spatial relationships, which I really like that one, which means space between elements are all the same. If we have a article that has some body text here, and then another column here, and another column here, and then another column here, this spacing between it should all be the same. That gutter here doesn't really make sense with it being so big. So you want to make sure that spatial relationship is also similar. If I zoom into this space and this space should be the same. This space is the same. This space, so you can kind of see how nothing is drastically different. It's having good repetition between spaces. Line thickness, font sizes, all of that can be having some good repetition. So here, the font they use here and the title is the same. And then they switched for the body text, but they use the same font for these subtitles. They just capitalized and bolded it. So I would say the rule for us is to have 1 to 2 fonts that we're working with. And if we want to make them different, we can just change them to be italicized or bolded. So that is repetition. Here you can see a 2-page spread, and they're repeated several elements. The color, so yellow goes across both pages along with the blue. So yellow and blue are spreading across. This font that 27 is in matches this font, matches this font. Okay. Repetition unifies our work. So there's a lot of examples in this one of the different fonts that they're using, the colors that they're using, even the visual elements and the lines to make sure that we know this all flows together. In your example here, I can see that there's repetition in the color, the accent color that we're using. Same thing with the rectangles here. This font and this font, I think all 3 of those fonts are the same. So here we're using repetition to make sure this all flows together. Another example here that this person also went another extra step and photoshopped all these photos to even have this teal hue so that all the pictures match the accent color to be teal. All right. So we've done C for contrast, R for repetition. So next in CRAP is A, alignment, which I think is one of the most important elements. Alignment just means that nothing should be placed on the page arbitrarily. So every element should have some visual connection to another page on the element. For example, one of my favorite examples here, because they did a perfect job of it, is they lined up the title, left and right side, with the body text columns. They also added this little line element, and of course, it lines up just the right length. It's not going over quite a bit here. Also down here, you can see that there are some elements here that they've lined up perfectly. That might seem very clear, and it makes it very easy to read. It's very pleasing for us to look at something like that because it has very clear alignment. However, this one is tilted. All the elements here seem to be at an angle, but the alignment still works. So here I can see the alignment of these photos with the column, even though it's tilted. The alignment here of the edge of these words with the edge of this column. So you want to make sure that everything on your page lines up. That means that when you add photos, you're going to be placing them in a frame that is similar to a clipping mask in Google Slides, which we've used before. So a clipping mask, when you place a photo inside this frame, certain parts of it will show up. Even though it may be going on the outside of that frame, that's kind of clipped and cut off. So this photo is probably much larger, but we're just focusing in on part of that. You'll be able to do that in InDesign. This example I like to call visual vomit. Okay, so this is visual vomit because here you can see that things, except for one thing, nothing here is lined up. Everything seems to be placed there unintentionally. So just like if you get sick to your stomach and you throw up, you can't really help where you throw up. Things just kind of fly everywhere. That's what seems to have happened on this page. So they've added pictures, they've added text, they've added bullet points that go with nothing else. And they're even their logo on top. So this is what we want to avoid, is having visual vomit on our pages. We'll have something more like this, where our pictures are all lining up, our text and our line elements are lining up, even though that's not even a straight line. All right, and here you can see that even the left and the right column have perfect alignment. All right, and our last one is the P. So we've done contrast, repetition, alignment, and the last one is proximity. The last we save for last because it's also quite easy. Proximity just means that elements that are related should be grouped together. So here somebody gave a Google Doc, a document of information, and you can't really pick out anything quickly. Then they've altered it, and then they've added the title with the subtitle close to each other. They've added the name of the place along with the date and the entry fee really close to each other. And then the description is together. So it kind of breaks things apart. So you can think about your title, your body text, and then your artist statement and your author statement separate, but then grouped based on what's similar. Here in this table of contents, it's easy to read because it's showing this big number 12, what's on that page, all these things. I know they're on there because they're very close to the 12. Then here's 24. What's on it? All these elements because it's very close to the 24. The example I'm giving in our template is here is the caption, and it's kind of evenly spaced between the picture and the title. So it makes me confused is this a caption for the picture or is it a subtitle somehow? Over here, I've tucked up that caption to the photo so that it is really clear that this is actually a caption for this photo. You want to think about that when you're adding your captions. And the final part we're going to talk about today, now that we've talked about parts of the magazine, we've talked about the principles of design. Now, how are we actually going to design that? We are going to be using Adobe InDesign. So you've probably used Photoshop or maybe even Illustrator in the past. And now we're going to be adding one more program to our repertoire, which is InDesign. This is used to design magazines, to design posters and layouts. It can do a lot of amazing things. It does take a bit of work to learn. So you are probably familiar with designing in Canva, but we want you to try and challenge yourself and learn the program InDesign for a couple of reasons. One, it is right at your zone of proximal development, which means that it's just going to be hard enough for it to be challenging to you and not too easy for you, which Google Slides or Canva may be. The second reason is this is what's used in the actual design industry. So if you are ever going to be designing something, you'll have a leg up on actually how to use the real software. Before you start designing in InDesign, which we'll be practicing today as well, we need to prepare our designs. So every designer always thinks about what they want something to look like before they actually start designing it. And we do that with something called a scamp. So it's kind of a scamp, which you can write down for a vocab word, is like a brainstorm. Okay. So if you're really good at sketching, you'll probably sketch out what you want your design to look like. If you're not so good at drawing, that's fine too. You can sketch it out with really simple elements like this. So if you're going to make a scamp for your magazine layout, it's probably going to look more simple like this. Boxes for where you think you want a picture, words where you think you might want a title, and then even just scribbles where you think the body text is going to be. You don't need to write the text again. It's just kind of planning, like a blueprint. Where do you think the different elements will go on your page? To help make things easier, since this is a new program for us, I've designed several templates that you'll be able to download, and then you'll just be able to delete the pages that you don't want to use in the template and choose what you do want to use. I want to just show you some of those quickly before you start working independently. So here's one of the templates. And you can see this is what it might look like when it was designed. Here's another one that's just for one page. If you think that you're going to have 3 photos in just one page, a shorter article. Another one that is one page, but it has, maybe you have 4 images that you want to use. Another one pager. And there are actually many more in the drive for you. So when you download that file, I've added 3 new ones this year that you can play around with that are all 3 spreads. So what you're going to do now, first of all, you should have come here with InDesign installed. If for some reason you do not have InDesign installed, the tutorial of how to install it is the first thing on the website. If you're having issues, it could be because you need to update your computer. It could be because you don't have enough space, and you'll have to take care of that yourself, or you'll go to visit the help desk. They are aware that we're using Adobe InDesign and they're ready to help you. The other things that we're going to do today are 2. One is browse templates and plan your design. So let's say you don't have InDesign yet, you're going to download it for homework. You might plan your design offline and just draw out what it looks like. You might still do that, draw out what it looks like as you browse the templates. So connected to the Google Classroom assignment is the link for where the folder is that you can download the template and use it. So you could browse the templates. In that folder is also a PDF, just if you want to look at the templates before you download them. And then you'll also be learning InDesign by doing one tutorial. I've limited it to 2 options this year. So there's 2 options of tutorials that you can watch for InDesign. One is quite short and one is longer. I do recommend the longer one. You'll just learn a lot more in that. And that you could start in class or you could do it for homework. The point of those tutorials is that you're doing it along with the person. You're not just watching them do it. And if you have extra time, why not get started? The first tutorial is specifically for picking your template. So it talks you through how to choose it. And then you'll go and you'll begin your work. It goes in a very specific order. And that is, first you'll add your body text. Then you will add your pictures. And then you'll do a little bit of the design work. So on that first document that I showed you, here, also on Google Classroom, is the exact order that you'll be following the tutorials in. So 1 all the way through video 5. So you will start by choosing a template, then you must add your body text. So watch the video, then you do it. Then you have to add and resize your images, watch the video, and then you do it yourself. And then I teach you a little bit in video 4 about how to do some of the customizing of colors and background colors to make sure the contrast is good. So it is time to start with some of that independent work. You might want to grab this checklist off of Google Classroom, and your teacher can leave the following on the board for you. So let's just get back to that last slide, what we are actually working with today. So I will be online and in your next couple of classes that you can jump into any of the help rooms. So I will invite you via Google Calendar. If you want to join to get any support, you can do that. All right. Good luck and thanks for your attention today.